Open the Christian Bible to the words of Jesus. In most editions, they're printed in red, which is either the most honest thing the church ever did or the cruelest joke it ever played on itself. Jesus' words are not doctrine. They are not theology. They are not the product of a council or a committee or a confession. They are one voice, speaking directly to whoever is standing in front of him, and what that voice says has never been fully reckoned with by any institution that claims to carry it. Read them straight through sometime, 4 hours. Not the commentary, not Paul's letters, not the creeds or the confessions. Just him, just those red-letter words. Those are the little over 31,000 words that Christianity should be based on. You will find someone who told a wealthy young man to liquidate everything he owned, who said the last would be first, and meant it structurally, not spiritually, who told his followers to love their enemies, not strategically, not symbolically, but as a direct command with no asterisk attached. He said the poor in spirit inherit the kingdom. He said the meek inherit the earth. He said the ones who hunger for justice, real justice, not ceremonial justice, will be filled. That is not a comfort. That is a confrontation. And it is aimed directly at you, not at your denomination, not at your tradition, at you. For a brief, electric moment in history, these words did exactly what they were supposed to do. They reorganized people. They broke apart the social assumptions of the ancient world. They told slaves and fishermen and tax collectors and Samaritan women that the thing they'd been taught to believe about their own worth was a lie. The early communities that formed around Christ's teachings were not perfect, but they were attempting something radical. They shared what they had. They sat at tables with people their culture told them to despise. They absorbed violence rather than returning it. Their connection to Christ was direct, personal, no layers required, and then fear showed up. Not corruption, not yet, just fear. The fear of people trying to hold something sacred together without the physical presence of the one who gave it weight. So they built structure, they drafted doctrine, they created offices and councils and creeds. None of that was evil. Most of it was earnest. But here's what nobody said out loud. A direct connection between a person and God, oriented by the actual words of Christ, doesn't need a professional class to manage it. Christ doesn't need gatekeepers, he doesn't need hierarchy, and Christ doesn't need an institution deciding who's in and who's out. And that is a problem. If you are trying to build an institution, by the time Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire in the 4th century, something quiet had happened. The faith of the margins had become the faith of the throne, and a faith that sits on a throne does not distribute power downward. It consolidates it upward. The red letters got reframed as spiritual poetry. Beautiful, but not operational. Important in theory, but impractical in administration. Jesus became the savior of souls, not the one whose words every individual is personally responsible to reckon with. His commands got sorted into 2 categories. The ones that were manageable, belief, ritual, church attendance, tithing, those became the requirements. The ones that were genuinely threatening, love your enemy, radical generosity, direct unmediated access to God, those became aspirational. Something for the especially holy, not for regular people trying to run a civilization. They didn't burn the red letters. That would have been too obvious. They just turned them into a font choice. Think about what that cost, not theologically, personally. Because the red letters were never addressed to systems. They were never addressed to institutions or nations or denominations. Every single command he gave was aimed at an individual standing in front of him. The rich young ruler wasn't told to lobby for wealth redistribution. He was told to go sell his things. The command was personal. The responsibility was personal. The reckoning was personal. That is what the institution could not survive. Not the ethics. They could manage the ethics. What they couldn't survive was the directness. A person who takes the red letters seriously as their own individual responsibility doesn't need the system to mediate their relationship with God. they need to go do what he said. The power structure doesn't disappear because people stop believing. It disappears because people start obeying. Here is what makes this more than just criticism of organized religion. It's a theological crisis that lands at the individual level. If the red letters are the clearest signal we have of what God looks like in human form, if the incarnation means anything, if the claim that Jesus reveals the Father is true, then what we do with those words is not just a theological preference, a denominal choice. It is a personal decision about orientation, about who and what you are actually pointed toward. Every time a person decides the Sermon on the Mount is too radical for their actual life, they are not making a practical concession. They are quietly voting on the nature of God. They are saying, the God revealed in those words is not the God I am actually prepared to face. The words are still there. That's the thing nobody can change. Every time someone opens that book, they are standing in front of a set of commands addressed personally to them, not to their church, not to their tradition. To them, which means finishing it, expanding it, was never the point. It was never a project to be completed by civilization or institution or collective effort. It was always an invitation extended to one person at a time. Jesus said the meek inherit the earth. Revelation gives you a cosmic war, a beast, a lake of fire, and 1,000 years of Christ ruling with an iron scepter. One of those is a lot easier to build a power structure on. One of those puts you in charge of deciding who's on the right side of the battle. Jesus said forgive, endlessly, without keeping score. Revelation keeps the most detailed score in all of literature. So when those two things sit inside the same book, when the Sermon on the Mount and the book of Revelation are bound together in the same cover and handed to you as one unified truth, you have to make a choice. Not officially. Nobody asks you to sign anything. But in practice, in the way you actually live and vote and treat people and decide who God is, you choose. And most of American Christianity chose Revelation. Not because Jesus was wrong, but because Jesus was harder, his way, his words. The red letters don't give you an enemy to destroy. They don't give you a tribe to belong to or a cosmic battle to feel righteous about. They just give you a command, aimed directly at you, that has no end and no loophole and no institution that can fulfill it on your behalf. And so the question every person who calls themselves a Christian eventually has to face alone, quietly, without a pastor or a pulpit to answer for them, is which sections of the Lord's book get the final word?